Good morning and welcome to the Red Mic. Happy Friday. Hope everybody's doing okay. Hope you have some big plans for the weekend. I know I do. But before we get into all that, just a reminder these Red Mic messages are leadership and life lessons I've picked up from 25 years as a public servant, 16 years as a youth football coach and scouting volunteer, and 10 years as a mediocre athlete with far more heart than actual physical ability. Today's Red Mic message is a departure of sorts, really very little talking about the workplace or interactions in the workplace, other than an acknowledgement that the subject of today's Red Mic message uh, is something you'll see in the workplace often, but you'll notice that I'm not wearing one today. And what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the the humble, the loathed, the venerated necktie. Happy International Necktie Day. If you didn't know such a thing existed, I know I certainly didn't until I saw it pop up on my Google Calendar a while back. Uh, International Necktie Day. Well, apparently this got started because Croatia started recognizing it October 18th as Necktie Day, and it became sort of internationally known. Well, why Croatia? Well, during the 30 Years' War, which was 1618 to 1648. Unlike the Hundred Years' War, the 30 Years' War was actually 30 years, and the Hundred Years' War lasted longer than 100 years. But that's a silly thing to note for some other time. Um, During the 30 Years' War, Croatian mercenaries wore bright scarves around their necks, usually red. Um, and supposedly these, overflowing, you know, pieces of cloth, which supposedly did have some some practical reasons. They weren't just, hey, shoot here, aim here, try to stick me in the neck here. Um, the cravat, as they became known because of the way French King Louis XIV apparently pronounced it, sort of a, pardon me, a bastardization of the word Croat. Um, he introduced these silk scarves as part of courtly fashion, and they started catching on slowly, but eventually you saw, people, you know, that's also where supposedly the idea of the ruffled shirt came in. It was a variation of the cravat without a cravat. It was a way to have that courtly fashion without uh, having to go to the expense of having a second piece of clothing. Now, the Croats apparently their cravats had many functions. One, they viewed it as sort of uh, a little bit of a protection for their neck. This was back during sword play and whatnot days. But also, they had practical reasons that they used them. Um, Basically, what were they? They were a big triangular piece of material that they tied around their necks, and gave them a flourish and all of that. Those those cravats ended up in the American Old West. You've seen people wearing the bandanas. Well, basically, you got to thank the Croats for that, at least for them becoming more and more prevalent. Uh, Now, what are some other functions? Well, as any good Boy Scout will tell you, although less now because neckerchiefs have become less prevalent in Boy Scouting, scouting, um, but also through the years the neckerchief has gotten smaller. When I was younger, when I was a scout, got you know right up to first class, and then sports, and as I say, the fumes got in the way, perfumes and exhaust fumes. Back then, neckerchiefs were a lot bigger, so they were easier to use. But in the old Boy Scout handbook, they showed multiple uses for that neckerchief. You could make an arm sling, you could make a head bandage, you could make any number of things. Most of them dealt with first aid, and the Croats apparently used them for a lot of those purposes as well. But the Croats didn't actually invent them. If you go back and look, if you've seen the statues from the old terracotta army in China, those who were recognized in one of the mummy movies. I don't remember which one it was. There were too many of them at the end. The first one was the only one that was really great. But um, there's about 8,000 of those terracotta army statues who guarded the tomb of the first Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huang. Well, they had these dressy scarves wrapped around their necks. And did they invent them? I don't know. They were also viewed in antiquity. Trajan's column in Rome, 1113 AD, on the 40-meter high columns, several of them, in addition to having different reliefs, and you can see legionnaires depicted there having a knotted scarf around their neck. So, back to the Croats. Um, Old Louis thought, man, that's cool. We're going to start using them. They became more and more prevalent. They changed from being just a simple piece of cloth cravat to being knotted and stitched, and throughout history. Initially, they were really wide, and if you lived through the '80s, they got to be really, really skinny. And then they started getting wide again throughout the '90s into the 2000s. And, well, Patrick, if you think ties are all that cool, why aren't you wearing one? Well, I didn't say they were cool. I'm just acknowledging them. In fact, I think for the most part, ties are ridiculous affectation now. And, again, apologies to Barney Stinson. While I do like wearing the suit, I don't like wearing a tie. I think they're ridiculous. But that being said, they are still part of our culture. I mean, you're not going to go into a bank and apply for a loan or something unless, you're probably rather nattily dressed and, you got the tie on. And I mean, how many bankers are you going to go in there and you see them in a wife beater and a pair of, board shorts or something? It's not just going to happen, you know. By and large, that's why they call it business dress, whereas this business casual. um, and again, the French name for the necktie was referred to as à la cravate, which was based on in the Croatian style. So, if you're wearing a tie today, tell people it's because you're recognizing International Tie Day, or because Barney Stinson is your is your hero of sorts. Whatever the reason, acknowledge it, even if for no other reason, just to say, hey, this is a silly thing I found out this morning. So thanks to the red mic, right? Anyway, that's today's red mic message. Not very long, but and frankly, probably not all that helpful. But I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope you'll join me again on Monday. I will actually have some not important, but some interesting things to say about business and about children in the workplace and acknowledging the role of children in our lives, and also a nod to a former boss of mine who, frankly, was not incredibly great for a lot of reasons, but was great because he let me bring my kid to work a time or two when we didn't have daycare. And also, going to mention a former boss of my wife's who was a jerk in every imaginable way. And more about that on Monday, though. So, that's today's Red Mic. I appreciate you for being here. I hope you have a good weekend. My weekend, Halloween party. We have one every year. Although I don't know if we're going to keep having them. Depends on turnout. We'll see. I hope to see you Monday. Have a great weekend. If you do go out and do any partying and everything, please be careful. Sunday, hook 'em horns. Or Saturday, hook 'em horns. Sunday, I'm not watching football. Come on. It's the Cowboys. The Cowboys are just really disappointing in so many ways this year. So no more NFL for me the rest of the season, I suspect, until playoffs and Super Bowl time. So, but I've rambled on long enough. I hope you have a good weekend. I appreciate you. I'll see you again Monday. And don't forget, life is short. Drink the bourbon.